Johnny Carson had been the king of late-night television for 30 years. 30 years of perfect timing, flawless delivery, unshakable composure. He'd interviewed presidents and criminals, comedians and astronauts, legends and nobodies. He'd navigated every kind of awkward moment, every technical disaster, every controversial topic with the same steady professionalism that made him America's most trusted late-night host. But on that particular Thursday night in 1988, something happened that no amount of experience could prepare him for. The show had started normally. The monologue landed well. The audience was warm and responsive. Johnny was in his element, relaxed, confident, delivering jokes with the precision of a man who'd done this 10,000 times before. Ed McMahon laughed in all the right places. Doc Severinsen and the band provided the perfect musical punctuation. Everything was running like clockwork. Then, about 12 minutes into the show, something unusual happened. A stage manager walked onto the set during a commercial break. Whispered something to Johnny. Johnny's eyebrows raised slightly, surprise but not alarm. He nodded. The stage manager retreated. When they came back from commercial, Johnny's demeanor had shifted. Not dramatically. Just slightly. The kind of shift only people who'd watched him for decades would notice. "Ladies and gentlemen," Johnny said, setting down his note cards, "we're going to do something a little different tonight. We have a guest who wasn't on the schedule. Someone who apparently decided he wanted to stop by." The audience murmured. Curious. Intrigued. Unscheduled guests were rare on The Tonight Show. Everything was planned. Rehearsed. Controlled. Johnny looked toward the curtain. "Please welcome Mr. Frank Sinatra." The audience exploded. Frank Sinatra walked onto the stage, and the entire energy of the studio shifted. This wasn't just a celebrity. This was royalty. The chairman of the board. One of the most famous voices in American history. He was 72 years old, still sharp, still commanding presence just by existing in a room. Johnny stood. They shook hands. The handshake lasted longer than usual. Frank pulled Johnny into a brief hug. When they separated, there was something in Frank's expression that the cameras couldn't quite capture. Something serious beneath the famous Sinatra smile. They sat. Frank in the guest chair. Johnny back at his desk. The audience settled. Waiting. "Frank," Johnny said, "I have to admit, I didn't know you were coming tonight." "Neither did I," Frank said, his voice that familiar rasp. "Until about 2 hours ago." Johnny laughed. "What changed your mind?" Frank looked at Johnny. Really looked at him. The studio went quieter. "I heard something today. Something that made me realize I needed to come here. Tonight. And say something to you that I should have said a long time ago." Johnny's smile faltered slightly. "Just for a second." "Frank, you're making me nervous." "Don't be nervous, Johnny. Just listen." The band had stopped their ambient playing. The audience was completely silent. Even Ed McMahon, usually quick with a quip, sat perfectly still. Frank leaned forward slightly. "You know, I've been in this business a long time. Longer than most people in this room have been alive. I've seen performers come and go. I've seen talent. I've seen hacks. I've seen everything in between." Johnny nodded, not sure where this was going. "And in all those years," Frank continued, "I've never seen anyone do what you do. Night after night. Year after year. Making people laugh. Making people feel welcome. Making people forget their troubles for an hour before bed." Johnny shifted in his seat. Uncomfortable with praise. He'd always been that way. "Frank, I appreciate that, but I'm not finished," Frank said gently. "Not unkind. Just firm." Carson stopped mid-monologue. The entire studio froze. Johnny sat back. "Let Frank continue." "I heard today," Frank said, his voice softer now, "that you're thinking about retiring. That you're tired. That you've been doing this so long you're not sure you have it in you anymore." Johnny's face changed. Surprise. Vulnerability. The mask slipped for just a second. Frank, I don't know where you heard that, but it doesn't matter where I heard it. Frank interrupted. What matters is that I'm here to tell you something. And I need you to really hear me. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the stage lights. The distant whir of the cameras. Nothing else. Frank Sinatra looked directly at Johnny Carson. Two legends. Two men who defined American entertainment for generations. And Frank said 8 words that would change everything. You saved my life more than once. Johnny blinked. Confused. What? You saved my life. Frank repeated. More than once? You just didn't know it. The audience didn't move. Didn't breathe. Waiting. Frank's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it now. Something raw. There were nights, Johnny. Dark nights. Nights when I was alone and the demons were loud and I didn't think I could make it to morning. Nights when the bottle wasn't helping anymore. Nights when I'd lost people I loved and didn't know how to keep going. Johnny's eyes were fixed on Frank. He'd stopped being a host. He was just a man listening to another man. And on those nights, Frank continued, I'd turn on the television. And you'd be there. Making jokes about the news. Talking to some actor or comedian. Just being you. And something about it, about your voice, your timing, the way you made everything seem manageable. It would pull me back. It would remind me that morning was coming. That there was still laughter in the world. That I could make it through. Johnny's hand moved to his face, covering his mouth. His eyes were glistening. You weren't trying to save anyone, Frank said. You were just doing your job. But you saved me anyway. And I know I'm not the only one. I know there are millions of people out there who've had dark nights. Who've felt alone. Who've turned on the Tonight Show and felt a little less scared because you were there. Behind the scenes, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. Johnny stood up. Not dramatically. Just slowly. Like he needed to move. Like sitting was impossible. He walked around his desk. The cameras followed him. Frank stood too. And without a word, without a cue, without anything planned or rehearsed, Johnny Carson hugged Frank Sinatra. It wasn't a show hug. It wasn't performative. It was real. Johnny's shoulders shook slightly. Frank held him. Two old men who lived impossible lives, holding each other on national television while millions watched. When they separated, Johnny's face was wet. He didn't try to hide it. Didn't make a joke. Just stood there, raw and human and completely undone. I didn't know, Johnny said, his voice barely above a whisper, but the microphones caught it anyway. I had no idea. How could you? Frank said gently. You can't know who you're reaching. You just do the work. And trust that it matters. Johnny nodded. Wiped his eyes. Tried to pull himself together. Failed. Tried again. The audience sat in absolute silence. Some were crying. Some were smiling through tears. All were witnessing something they'd never seen before. Johnny Carson, unfiltered and unguarded, completely vulnerable on live television. Johnny turned to the camera. To America. To the millions watching. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Frank said. I just needed you to know. Before you decide you're done. Before you walk away. You need to know that what you do matters. That you've saved lives. That the world needs you. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Johnny returned to his desk. Sat down heavily. Frank sat back in the guest chair. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. The silence wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Finally, Johnny spoke. You know, Frank, I've interviewed thousands of people on this show. Politicians, actors, musicians, athletes. And I've always tried to stay separate. To not let it get too personal. To keep the armor on. I know, Frank said. But tonight, Johnny continued, You've stripped that away. And I don't know if I can put it back. Good, Frank said simply. Don't. Ed McMahon, sitting at his usual spot, spoke for the first time. His voice was thick with emotion. Johnny, if I may. Frank's right. We all know it. Everyone who works on this show. Everyone who watches. You matter more than you know. Doc Severinsen nodded from the band area. Several crew members who'd worked with Johnny for years were openly crying. Johnny looked around the studio. At the faces. At the people. At the evidence of 3 decades of work that had somehow added up to something bigger than he'd ever imagined. I started this job, Johnny said slowly, because I wanted to make people laugh. That's all. Just make people laugh before bed. I never thought. I never imagined it could be more than that. It's always more than that, Frank said. Art saves lives, Johnny. Even when it's just late-night comedy. Especially when it's just late-night comedy. Because people need laughter when everything else is falling apart. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. Johnny opened his desk drawer. Pulled out a stack of letters. They were worn. Folded and refolded countless times. I keep these, he said quietly. Letters from people who write to say the show helped them. Who say they were going through something terrible and watching helped. I've never talked about them. Never showed them on air. I just keep them. Read them sometimes when I'm doubting myself. He held up the stack. There are hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. I stopped counting. But every single one says the same thing Frank just said. That the show mattered. That it helped. That I helped. Frank reached over. Put his hand on Johnny's arm. Then you know I'm not making it up. You know you can't walk away. Not yet. Johnny looked at the letters. Then at Frank. Then at the audience. I thought about quitting because I'm tired. Because 30 years is a long time. Because I'm not sure I have anything new to say. You don't need to say anything new, Frank said. You just need to keep showing up. Keep being you. Keep reminding people that morning is coming. Johnny set the letters down carefully. Looked directly into the camera. I started tonight thinking this was just another show. Just another Thursday. But Frank came here and reminded me why this matters. Why any of this matters. And I think I needed that reminder. He took a breath. Composed himself slightly. The host was returning. But different. More human. So if you're out there watching, if you're having a dark night, if you're not sure you can make it to morning, I want you to know something. You're not alone. And tomorrow is coming. And there will be laughter again. The audience erupted. Not in applause. In something bigger. Louder. Cathartic. A standing ovation that went on for over a minute. Frank stood. Extended his hand to Johnny. Johnny took it. They shook hands like men who just made an unspoken pact. Then Frank did something unexpected. He pulled a small silver cufflink from his own shirt. Handed it to Johnny. Keep this, Frank said. On the nights you doubt. Look at it. Remember tonight. Johnny held the cufflink. A simple piece of metal that suddenly meant everything. Thank you, Frank. For coming. For saying what you said. For reminding me. Thank you for being there, Frank said simply. On all those dark nights. You saved me, Johnny. More times than you'll ever know. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Johnny didn't retire that year. Or the next. He stayed for 4 more years. And every night before the show, he touched that cufflink. A reminder. A promise. That what he did mattered. When he finally did retire in 1992, he kept Frank's cufflink in a small box on his desk at home. The letters stayed in his drawer. And the memory of 8 words, "You saved my life more than once," stayed with him forever. Frank Sinatra passed away in 1998. At the funeral, Johnny Carson was there. Quiet. reserved, grieving. And in his pocket, he carried that silver cufflink. A piece of a night when two legends reminded each other, and the world, that art saves lives. That showing up matters. That sometimes the most important thing you can do is just be there when someone needs you. The Tonight Show went on. Other hosts came. But that moment, Johnny breaking down, Frank speaking truth, 8 words changing everything, became legend. Proof that even after 30 years, even when you think you've seen it all, there are still moments that can crack you open. Still moments that remind you why any of this matters. And somewhere, in the space between performance and truth, Johnny Carson learned what Frank Sinatra already knew: you can't measure the lives you've touched. You just keep showing up. Keep doing the work. Keep being the light in someone's dark night. Because 8 words can save a life. And 30 years of showing up can save thousands.